this government that positions himself as a very pro-climate here, especially at COP30, talking about transitioning away from fossil fuels. But internally, we have a very different scenario. So what we did at the Brazilian Climate Observatory with other organizations, with other 8 organizations and networks, is that we're basically suing the government. So we're suing the government, we're suing the Environmental Institute, and we're also suing Petrobras, who is basically our biggest oil company here in Brazil. And what we're saying is that there was no consultation to the indigenous people. The area is very, very sensitive environmentally, and the data is outdated. So we now have to see how this is going to go, because we don't want this to be the first of a lot of explorations in the Amazon basin. But I agree, we have to see. It's the third day of COP. We may have some hopeful negotiations and a roadmap to transition away from fossil fuels. That would be the best case scenario.
Thank you. This actually brings me already to the second round. So what will it take? What kind of strategies do you use? And which are also needed, but maybe is also not successful. And maybe you talked already about like that you sue your government and Petrobras. And Heidi, maybe you also might to tell us a bit like what strategies are proving effective in shifting political will and resisting fossil fuel expansion, like on the international pressure side.
Sure. I think we are at a point where we need a strategy which has all hands on deck, as simple as that. And that's why we need to use every tool in the toolbox to make sure that there is action. So after we got the historic decision in Dubai, where is the plan to implement that, right? So clearly this process has been extremely slow and excruciatingly painful, which has not delivered. So what do we need? We need things that are outside the system, which are helping us retrofit this system, right? So look at what happened with ITLOS agreement. ICJ, historic, really calling out states that you have a responsibility, you cannot continue to expand fossil fuels, and you have to take away all the incentives that are going to the fossil fuel industry, and to the extent saying that you have to repair the harm. Fossil fuel treaty, we have got great momentum with 17 countries calling for a treaty, again recognizing the gap and saying we can create something which is far more comprehensive, which complements the Paris Agreement. And that's where this motion, which I refer to, that we worked together on, and thanks to WWF for leading on it, where we saw that now there's going to be a whole support from the biodiversity movement, from the nature movement, to see how we connect the climate, nature, biodiversity conversation and start looking at it. So that's the international level. And of course, the progress that we are now seeing here, and we really hope that we leave Belém with a mechanism for it, I think that is bridging that gap. But that's not enough. We need to also make sure that we are supporting countries nationally to make that transition. Now that's where very practical things need to happen. When governments are making their industrial policies and investment plans, we need to remind them that you cannot invest in the standard assets of the future. And that's where making sure that the real finance flow happens so that they are able to move away. In many developing countries, it's not a matter of transition, it's about leapfrogging. You start with the right thing because it's not a transition. You never had those systems to ensure energy access for people. So I think that's where some very concrete work needs to happen, looking into their policies, making sure that the finance is going in the right direction, and that fight for finance is also at the international level. So I think we need to, and of course, the movement building that we always do, which has helped us get where we are right now, continuing to put pressure at various levels, and talking about how fossil fuels are not only exacerbating climate change and have been the primary drivers, but also causing local environmental harms. I come from Delhi, which is such a polluted city. Yesterday I was sitting at the Pakistan pavilion sharing the same concern. So there are many entry points for us right now to make sure that we are all walking in the same direction to move away from fossil fuels and build a greener world.
Thank you. What for me is also really important that we need to break the silos. We need to talk outside of the energy bubble with the biodiversity people, with the local communities, and to communicate. We are all, it affects everyone, everywhere. Thank you. And Eve, over to you. Sorry that I'm leaning into that direction a bit right now. So system change away from fossil fuel dependency is often described as complex, and I mean, Harjit already mentioned it a bit, and multi-layered. From your personal perspective and also, of course, from your work perspective, what are the most critical factors or approaches that can make this transformation happen effectively and at scale?
I think we cannot underestimate the screams of a dying industry. The fossil fuel industry is outspending us on lobbying. It's outspending us on marketing. They have corrupt decision makers around the world and made countries dependent on the toxic products that they sell. I think a lot of governments, especially in the global north, are also complicit in keeping this system in place. And all of you on your chairs, you have this lanyard to end fossil fuel subsidies and redirect finance. And I think in terms of the biggest system change that we need, it has to be around finance. There are really varied estimates of how much fossil fuel subsidies are spent annually. From about 1 trillion, I've seen up to estimates up to $50 trillion a year, which of course outspends just about any calculation on investments in clean energy or anything positive for the world. So we really can't underestimate the financial power of what we are up against. That being said, the subsidies that we are talking about are coming from our governments, and we have the power to influence that. And so I think one of the biggest pressure points that we need to push on is pressuring our governments to make good, particularly G20 countries, which, by the way, agreed in 2009 to end inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. And to this day, they have still not done that. And so that's really something that we have to push hard on, because unlocking that question will shift the whole system. If we end the fossil fuel subsidies, which are propping up a dying industry, we take away that crutch that is holding up this industry. We redirect those funds towards clean energy investments, towards supporting countries in the global south to make the transition, and to support the just transition for communities and workers as well. So I think that's really where, how we're going to make this this transition happen. One of the key shifts in the system that we need to see is around finance.
Thank you very much. So, Mariana, you already mentioned the contradictory situation on the domestic level, but international dynamics can influence domestic decisions. This is why we're all here, right? So, in your view, how can international pressure, whether through diplomacy, agreements, or like peer influence, effectively support and accelerate the domestic action in Brazil?
If I'm being quite honest, I don't know if the international dynamics affect the national dynamics so much when it comes to oil exploration. Because what we have now is that we have Petrobras, who is the sort of symbol. It has a very heavy symbol and economic importance to Brazil. So what we need is not necessarily investments or diplomacy. We do need a good roadmap to transition away from fossil fuels. That is unnegotiable. But what we need and what we're trying to work now in Brazil nationally is to change these national oil companies, the way that they work, to change the heart of it. So what we're doing is that we're launching a study. We launched a study called The Petrobras That We Need. We need to change the way that Petrobras works so that it stops being dependent on oil and it becomes a true energy company. So they need to start investing. As you were saying, they need to stop giving subsidies. The government needs to stop giving subsidies to oil, and it needs to start investing in renewable energies, in low carbon energies. So that is exactly what we're trying to do now. We launched a study, and what we need to do now is advocacy regarding the study. Because what we're arguing is that we do not want Petrobras to lose their jobs. We don't want the economy in Brazil to crumble. And we don't want Petrobras to lose this symbolic value because the people of Brazil see it as something that they're proud of. We just need to change the way that it works. So what we're doing now, and there's going to be an event later today regarding this study specifically and how it can work also on other countries that are also very dependent on oil. So I think it can be a way for these countries to work together sort of in rechanging the way that their state company works.
Do you also want to tell us when the event is and where?
It's here at
It's here.
WWF,
Ah.
yes. My boss is going to come
Sorry.
speak. It's going to be amazing. I
And at
recommend
what time?
it. At 3 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken.
So join us again.
Yeah.
So for the last,
Can I just add
Yes, of
one?
course.
And thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mariana, for saying. And we need to recognize that at the national level, our strategies are required to be absolutely contextual. And I'm being reflective on our movement as well. I think we talked about the global campaigns without recognizing the national realities. And when we talk about particularly the state oil companies and state energy companies, I mean, coming from India, we face a similar challenge. You cannot protest against Indian oil, right? You'll be seen as a stupid person to do that. So what you need to do is to change that narrative and take away the social license of the fossil fuels and talk about local issues so that people start understanding. I think we need a very nuanced, contextualized strategy for different countries. For us in India, pollution is a great entry point. That's what people will relate to, the health challenges. So I think that's what we need, and then connect it with the international. I think at the international level, what we are trying to do with all this is, again, taking away the social license of the industry to set up plans so that what national companies are doing begin to start look incoherent with the development model. And then people are like, why we are with fossil fuels when the whole world is moving away from it? I think connecting that is going to be extremely useful.
and I mean, it connects also with what you said earlier, that we need to bridge the gap between the different bubbles. So, and if we also need to learn to speak their language, right? Because every, the economy speaks a different language, cities, subnational level speaks a different language, and we need to learn to address this. So this would bring me to our last round here, and then I would open up to the audience. So please prepare if you have a question. You're very welcome to ask. But looking ahead to COP30, we're on the third day. What is one concrete outcome? We already heard about the roadmap, but maybe we could dive into this a bit more. You're looking forward at COP, which is crucial for you, and also one risk or two risks or more risk we must confront. And I would who would like to start? You? Thank you.
Okay, so my dream outcome, we were very fortunate during the World Leaders Summit opening last week that President Lula really made a strong call not only to get rid of our dependence on fossil fuels, but those are easy words to say, to get rid of a dependence. But we really need to commit to a roadmap. He talked about deforestation, but also on transitioning away from fossil fuels. Because this COP28 commitment on the transition away, it's very clear that these words are not enough. We need a plan for how we get there. And there are a number of proposals on the table right now. The government of Colombia has put forth a ministerial declaration that they're hoping to get sign-on and support for, which is about getting us off of fossil fuels and creating a process by which that would happen. The Alliance of Small Island States has also put forth a proposal that's linking more to raising the ambition of the nationally determined contributions. So we've seen that taken together, the new NDCs are really not sufficient to get us on track with the Paris Agreement timelines. And so the AOSIS proposal is really focused on raising ambition in the transitioning away. And the number of civil society actors have also collaborated around a transition, around a roadmap for transitioning away. And there's a number of different ways that we could see that landing, whether it's support from the presidency. It's unlikely that given some of the dynamics that we'll see a negotiated outcome on this. But we still have hope that there will be space, potentially in a cover decision or outside of negotiated elements, that would essentially create a process through which countries would come together to get a roadmap determined. So both at the global level, but also support a process at the national level. As Harjeet and Mariana have really rightfully flagged, national circumstances are really different. And it's important, particularly, that global north countries are the ones that are phasing out first and fastest. So that countries in the global north are putting out bold climate plans that are showing how they are concretely transitioning away and facilitating the transition also for development countries. Your second part of the question was on the barriers. And they are well known to those of us who follow these negotiations. Whether it's the countries that benefit most from the system as it exists today, whether it's the companies that infiltrate these COPs, how many thousands of fossil fuel industry lobbyists are amongst us. Maybe they're sitting here, even in the audience. Make yourselves known. We have to be aware that, and also who's not in the room, right? The U.S. Played a really toxic, spoiling role in the recent International Maritime Organization negotiations, and I think we can't rule out that the U.S., even though the national government is not here, we know that they can play a very toxic role and derail the process even from afar. So there we go.
Thank you, Eve. You already gave a broad overview about many things. Hadid, would you like to add your one desired outcome and also some barriers?
Bam, bam, bam. No, we have been talking about Belém action mechanism, and I think it's extremely comprehensive. But at the same time, need to see what actually we land, and that will not happen in isolation. And that's where again we need to continue to reinforce it through ICJ and what we are getting at IUCN and Fossil Fuel Treaty to make sure that it remains on track and remains complementary. Because the kind of efforts that are required to make that transition, I don't think we are even scratching the surface here. We are talking about jobs, we are talking about energy access, we are also talking about economic diversification. That's not going to happen with this narrow way of thinking. That's the kind of conversation happening. So BAM can be a great anchor, but then it has to take into account how other processes can support, and then we all can actually have a much more comprehensive mechanism.
Thank you.
My fear has been the US, by the way, I must say, but with the strong leadership from Colombia and Brazil with all the challenges, I think they are standing up to that political pressure, and I hope the IMO thing is not repeated here. I'm fairly confident now.
And the US is not here at the moment, so Mariana.
I think that Brazil is an interesting player because although we are, for example, with the licensing to drill the Foz Amazonas, it is brave of Lula to talk about transitioning away from fossil fuel. So I am quite hopeful. I mean, for COP30 to happen in my country, and we have very experienced diplomats working, and I am hopeful that they will be able to get to a negotiation where they, in the best case scenario, the oil producing, heavy oil lobbyists do not interfere with the negotiations. That would be the most hopeful of all of the decisions. And as Eve was saying, to get concrete things out of the paper, not just words, not just speaking about transitioning away, but an actual plan. Like, for example, if Colombia, I'm interested, I haven't seen the plan yet. We were discussing this yesterday. And if Colombia actually presented a workable plan, if other countries could adopt it, I mean, to negotiate upon this, that would be the best case scenario. I mean, we are looking at some points, adaptation, finance, TFFF. Brazil was actually very happy with some of the results that they got. Those are all very important points. But if we can get away with something regarding fossil fuels, like an actual, I think COP30 would be, that would be the best case scenario for COP30, evidently.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we need to overcome, like Lula made this great speech, but now we need to fit it into the process, right? I think this is really a challenge, also with regard to the domestic challenges. So thank you very much. And now, is there any question in the audience? Something you always wanted to ask? Manuel will talk to us later. Otherwise, I'm also looking at my colleague. We prepared a Menti, but I'm not sure if this will work. You know, to break the ice a bit, but we all have one question. Mariana, can I get your and then?
Okay, I am Marceli from WWF Brazil. I would like to know more about how do you see the role of the misinformation and disinformation promoted by the oil and gas companies, especially in this context of UNFCCC.
Thank you. So I would collect questions. If there's another one, and Jess is helping me. Otherwise, we also started the Menti. So what about the energy transition inspires you most to double down on the phase out? Also something to engage with you more. Otherwise, who wants to get the question? Eve?
Was there not I thought there was another question maybe in the audience. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me? Thank you. I am wondering, you know, some countries in Latin America, including Brazil, we have economies based on extraction. And how you recommend to those economies, especially the small ones, to phase out fossil fuels and diversify an economy and transition to another development model? Thank you. I know it's a very difficult question, but maybe some signs of hope. Thank you.
I'll take the disinformation question, yeah. So we all know that the fossil fuel industry has enormous budgets on marketing. And in a lot of countries, they've also infiltrated media and spread lies, playing down the urgency of the climate crisis, playing down their role in it, making individuals feel responsible. Many of you might know that the concept of the individual carbon footprint was invented by British Petroleum Marketing. It is a nonsense concept, the individual carbon footprint, to make the individual consumer feel guilty for living in the world and just trying to feed themselves and get to work and clothe themselves. And so I have to give them credit. They're clever, right? They've convinced a lot of us to feel guilty for our everyday choices. At COP last year, there was an initiative launched. I believe it's housed in UNESCO, which is the first time, actually, that the UNFCCC has explicitly created an initiative to sort of tackle this misinformation and disinformation. I believe there was a statement yesterday that came out, and there'll be a number of events to keep an eye on what that commitment looks like and how it trickles down at the national level. I'm based in France, In France, we have, like in a lot of other countries, a concentration of media that are increasingly owned by just a handful of billionaires that are really entrenched in the system as it is today. And they are also fueling this disinformation and this misinformation, so that the public, you lose support for our movement because of that. So it's an initiative to keep an eye on. So thank you for that really important question.
Thank you very much for asking how countries can transition. As I said about the campaigning, it has to be contextual, it has to be local, it has to be very different for each country, because each country is different in terms of its geographical location, its economic sectors that are dependent on fossil fuel to shift, and the time those sectors are going to take. So what we are doing at this moment as Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative, working with various countries to help them develop their just transition plans. Based on their economic model, based on the challenges they have, based on the opportunities that the green economy will bring, and how they need to protect jobs, how much time they would need. It all also depends on their income levels and the resource that they would need from the global system. So each country would require, and some are more dependent on, if I speak of island nations, it's tourism. Some, so each country is very different. So instead of getting into those details, I think we need to look at how we support them in coming up with a plan that they own, that speaks to their realities, and then as a system, how we enable international cooperation to help them plan. So sorry, I'm being generic, but that's exactly what we need at the global level, deliberate, so that we are not imposing our plan, telling them what to do, because each country is so different.
Thank you. Some last words, and then I would hand over to Manuel.
Of course. I'll be very quick to answer both
Thank you.
questions. Because in Brazil, we have a problem with the lobby. They have a very strong, very powerful lobbies in Congress. And what we have been doing is that we have been working with the press, especially to block some very, very bad bills in Congress, these very environmentally destructive bills in Congress, because they have the money, but we have the population. I mean, the population doesn't want to drink bad water. They don't want their environment to be polluted. They do not want necessarily fossil fuels. They don't know. So we do have been using a lot of the press. It has helped. So that is something that we often talk about. It's a way for us to stop a lot of the bad things that have been happening in Congress. And for the second part, I agree with Rajit. I think that there are very different national contexts, but what we have done in Brazil, I do suggest taking a look at Petrobras that we need, the study, because I think it can be applied to other very nationally, to other oil-dependent countries that have a lot of state-owned national companies. So I think that that can be useful for other countries, not only Brazil.
There will also be an event with Equinor later today at, I think, 5:30, looking at my Norwegian colleague. So also others who are interested, please join us. So thank you very much for this nice chat and for joining us today. And now you should sit here and you just, but I would like to introduce you first, Manuel, and thank you for also joining us here. I looked at your CV, it was very long, so forgive me that I shortened it a bit. Manuel is the global leader of the climate and energy at WWF. He has more than 35 years of experience in environmental law and policy. He served as the Minister of Environment of Peru and the President of the 20th Conference of the COP. You all remember that. Additionally, I think that's not me, it's the others. He was also the Executive Director of the Peruvian Society of Environmental Law, an influential institution in Latin America. So thank you very much, and thank you for clothing this panel, but opening the day. And I hand over to you.
Thank you, Fenje. And thank you, Mariana, Eve, Harjit, for this event. So I will try to organize some ideas as part of this closing based on what I have heard and fantastic panel. So let's imagine that we are strategizing based in a clear plan to accelerate the phasing out of fossil fuels. And what have we heard today? What are those elements based on which we can continue building upon? What is still pending and how to accelerate action? So this strategy, it will be called not drill baby drill, but think baby think. It's the idea it is we have to think on how to be more strategic in phasing out fossil fuels. So let's go into the first point, policies. It is true, we celebrated when we got the transitioning away from fossil fuels in the global stocktake in the UAE COP28. But still there are some pending elements. We do need to continue moving that fantastic framework to be fully implemented. And that is something in which we have to work on this kind of venues. On this kind of venues, in this case, in the COP30. But also there are some elements related to the policy. As for example, the IUCN motion 042 that it was adopted because of the World Conservation Congress that I will refer by the end of these words. Or we have the phasing out the non-fossil fuel proliferation treaty, and we have heard that Colombia is convening an important event for the coming year. And I don't know, Harjit, how many countries have already agreed to be part of this initiative?
Nations, but the Colombia Declaration, I think there are a number of countries who have already signed, and we will see more support coming by the 17th. They're announcing on 18th.
Excellent. So we have foundational pieces to move policy forward. And for sure, there are some other pending things. NDCs are not reflecting well how countries are planning to transitioning away from fossil fuels. But remember that it is not just about NDCs. Probably as important as NDC, it is the long-term strategies. So we have to work on countries that not everybody have prepared their long-term strategy to help them to define a clear vision that could support the 5-year plan that it is called NDC. So that in relation to policies. But I think, Mariana, you mentioned that you are suing the government. So there is a legal side on this strategy. And what we got with the ICJ and with the ICHR, the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, it has been fantastic. So in case of the ICJ, the idea of what are the duties of states and what does it mean if you breach your own obligations. That is a fantastic evolution of the legal system. And what are the consequences of breaching your own obligation? That in some way not to fulfill with your own NDC means that you are breaching your obligation. So that is why the importance of the ICJ. And in case of the other one, the ICHR, it's recognizing the right for a healthy climate. You can't imagine how important it is that we are evolving from the right for a healthy environment into the right for a healthy climate. And what the ICHR is telling us, so now we have the role of courts to continue improving those concepts that have been well reflected in those two advisory opinions. So it's a good idea. Sometimes we do need to go into sue actors and sometimes governments to move things forward. There is a third element, the role of science. And we have to strengthen the role of science because science is telling us what does it mean if we will continue burning fossil fuels. No, what it could be the projected consequences and what are the models of continue raising temperature because we are not achieving our objective mostly in relation to the energy transition. And I don't know who made the question about misinformation and disinformation, but for sure it is because of science that we can address that level of misinformation and disinformation. So we have to convene more actively science to be part of this strategy. Then it is about technology. Fortunately, technology related to clean, non-conventional sources of energy, it's growing, and the prices are dropping. So we have to continue working on those kind of technologies. Look, you remember, Harjit, in the beginning of this process, we used to identify hard to abate sectors. And even we were skeptic on how much they could switch their source of energy. One of those, it was the maritime. But what is happening with the maritime sector, it's amazing. They are moving things, the experience, and I don't like to mention any company, but what Maersk did by bringing new technology into their vessels, it was so interesting because they did it even without having that source of energy. So they dynamized. By bringing new technology, they dynamized the supply of that source of energy. Probably it is not the best of the best. You can listen? No? Can I show?
Also recognize.
Thank you. So that is the way. So there are some champions that can help to guide this process forward. Then it's about economy. Look, in times of geopolitical difficulties, in times of denialism, in times of resistance, as we are suffering now, probably by showing that this is an economic process could help us to overcome those difficulties. And it's about competitiveness. It is about development. So we have to strengthen that side. If you do want to be a competitive nation in 2030, you have to transitioning away from fossil fuels because competitiveness, it is related to that. It is related to your source of energy and how clean it could be. So also we have to work on that. Somebody mentioned about, you did it, Mariana, about how to change the way that companies is used to being operating. And that is something in which also we have to work on. And probably finally, and before of moving to the motion 042, the most behind a scenes piece of this strategy, it is finance. If mentioned the importance of working on eliminating subsidies, probably the most difficult part of this strategy. But that is something that we have to see smart avenues to deal with the problem. Because the volume of those huge numbers related to subsidies, it is something so difficult to combat. But we have to put all those pieces together to deal with. Let me finish by saying the motion 042, that finally it has been approved and it is now a resolution of IUCN, it is fantastic because it is promoting an analysis and assessment on how to transitioning away from fossil fuels. It is demanding, it is putting in hands of the Climate Action Commission that I am now sharing to provide guidance. So that is something that I personally committed to do. Also, it is looking on how to promote transparency as a way to also continue moving this objective forward. And it is finally encouraging Amazon countries to make the Amazon a free place for fossil fuels. So let's move our Amazonian countries to do that. If we will have this meeting in Colombia, that could be a good opportunity to get that level of commitment. So again, thank you, Mariana, thank you, Yves, Harjit, Fenje, Vivian, and you all for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know if this, do you hear me? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for this, and thank you very much for joining this opening of the event. And looking forward to like great discussions today and many insights and inspiration here. Also, thank you very much to the panelists, to Tatiana, to the Panda Hub team who is making everything possible despite all the challenges. Also, thank you very much to WWF Brazil and especially Fuji for supporting us here. So have a great day. Thank you.